We're so excited for today's show. We're going to talk about modern design and modern architecture. And modern is really confusing because there's a lot of other terms that fall within modern.
What's going to be very exciting for everyone is our marketing team here with Ryan, as you can see in the background, is going to be taking some pictures of all these different venues we're going to be setting up and having a great idea, making some brochures, some posts on Facebook to really clarify what all modern is and what encompasses it. So we have a lot of good venues we're going to set up for you here today.
Hey girls, would this solid gold chair be a modern piece?
Definitely.
I definitely think so.
You know,
That's
for
a good
19
one.
bucks, that's not bad.
You can leave that.
A little more modern, huh?
Probably not. Let's put that to the side right
Kayla,
now.
I found this out back. I really like it.
I don't think so, JR.
What about painted white?
The flowers, not
right.
so much.
What about these
Yes.
modern pieces?
That's a good one, Tyler. I think that's great.
on this. These are awesome.
These pillows?
No, those need to go. That's not
What about
quite it.
the white ones?
Yeah, I think that would definitely be a little simpler. I like that a lot. So as you can see here, there's a lot to it, and we're going to be able to really get into a lot of detail and explain what this modern is. So let's go open the show.
Welcome to Between the Studs. We are Granite Ridge Builders, custom builders serving northern Indiana, northwest Ohio, and also parts of southern Michigan. We have been building custom homes for almost 2 decades, and we're really passionate about what we do. So join us today as we explore the processes, the trends, and also tips that characterize today's new home. Thanks for watching.
You know, this Anderson book on how they do architectural styles, this one's International Modern. Today's subject is going to be modern, so I'm pulling a few things off of this, but I think this is going to be a really, really, really fun subject for everybody.
It really is, and I think we ought to go back to the basics or back to the history of modern in our country and kind of talk about that.
It's a really good idea because it is very confusing. There's so many terms that go with modern, but one area that I think it started, especially in the United States, was a guy in Chicago. Right after the 1871 fire, architects had a free rein to do anything they wanted. A gentleman by the name of Louis Sullivan, you might have heard that name, did a lot of arts and crafts. Then he went downtown to the Wainwright building. He was building 20-story buildings. They would take brick foundations. They would have to be 20 feet thick at the bottom in order to get something that high. Right during that time, they started coming out with things like steel, concrete, and they could get them a lot thinner. And he came up with a quote that everybody now today talks, and they say, form follows function. I never understood that until we started working on this. And here's what that basically means. Form, which is the outside of the building, you don't care about. All you want to do is take the inside function, and then the form follows that so you can make it very minimalistic. And I think that's where some of it started in the United States.
And Sullivan had a very famous student that you probably recognize, Frank Lloyd Wright. He took these principles and added an artistic side to that form versus function in 1935 with Falling Water. So we had this beautiful thing that was mostly function on the inside, but the outside actually had some artistic symbolism in it too. But his most probably predominant example of modernism would have been the Guggenheim Museum in New York, which was a round building. And of course, in the existing buildings in New York, it stood out like a sore thumb, and people thought it looked absolutely horrible. It was a big controversy. But Frank Lloyd Wright, of course, made it one of his most famous modern buildings now.
Now, before we talk about modern architecture here in the United States, we really have to go back to Europe, and we can contribute a lot of modern day architecture to a few architects during the periods of World War I and World War II over in Germany. Now, over in Germany, the Bauhaus was the center of design during World War I, and a lot of those architects were fleeing the country to get away from the war. They were ditching those old principles, adopting new ones. That's when they came to the United States. And with that modern architecture, we really see, you know, the form follows function and looking at homes and dwellings as machines for the living. So the stark and unadorned exteriors of these facades, you know, they were really focusing more on the inside of the building to, you know, look at the inhabitants to help that machine for the living and focusing more on the function.
Yeah, and Tyler, during this time, manufacturing kind of changed too. There were new products being introduced to the building industry. For example, plywood. A sheet of plywood that was standard, a 4x8 sheet, which then made us do everything 16-inch on center with our studs. reinforced concrete started becoming very popular, and that's how they were able to get some of those cantilevers on these plans. Steel and chrome came in, and really what it did was it standardized a lot of the building parts and pieces, which allowed them to be interchangeable, but at the same time it kind of minimalized and kind of took off some of the ornamentation of those houses.
Yeah, and Luke, because of those products, they were able to create a couple of key characteristics that really go with modern architecture. So we're looking at some specific colors, tendency to see a lot of whites and creams, the ability to do larger panes of glass now, so incorporating natural light on the inside. The other thing was important was some specific shapes. So when you talk about modern architecture, you'll see a lot of cubes and you'll see a lot of cylinders.
There was another style, it goes back in the 1930s, and you have to think about our Airstream RVs.
Think about that? About the ones like the big giant tin cans driving down the road?
That's it. And they call them suburban houses, and oftentimes you'd find them in like small cities and also along like the seaside. And they had flat roofs, and they were also very intrigued with aerodynamic style. Things like locomotives were becoming popular, airplanes, and also the ocean liners. So you think about that round effect. And they would build, sometimes they even put portholes in the side as windows because they were really intrigued with the style, those styles back then.
Now, all of these principles, design elements, and styles are great for the history, but we're going to talk about how it relates to today's modern world. So there are definitely several styles of modern that are broken out into subcategories, and it's kind of hard to tell the difference between, which one is which. And so Elizabeth and I are going to pair up with everybody and talk about all the different styles.
Yeah, and Kayla, you and I are going to talk about the international style, and there's a few inside that international style that goes with it.
And I'm going to talk about the most recent style, which is the contemporary style.
Sure.
One of the styles I'm going to talk about is brutalism. I'm going to touch on the fact that brutalism is just reinforced concrete, kind of talks about that stark, unadorned exterior, so it's really popular across America.
And I'll get to talk about the prairie style that's got a ranch and a two-story version, some different things we can look at with that one.
I'll talk briefly about the mid-century modern home, or the postmodern home as they call it.
And I'm so excited. Stay tuned for the end of the show. We have a modern home that we just finished. So we have it on tape from start to finish. We show the frame stage to the finished product. I can't wait.
Cool.
Okay, guys, Choice Designs have some settings for us that we can do our shots at. So I think they're ready. Let's go
Good.
grab your setting areas, and modern is in.
Kayla, today's subject is modern architecture, and when we talk about modern architecture, we have to talk about the term mid-century modern, because it's very popular today.
It absolutely is. So today's design style of mid-century modern is going to be taking a lot of the elements from the homes and design of the architecture that was done in about the 1930s to 1950s, even some 60s.
That's when I was born.
That's very true. So you know exactly what we're talking about, don't you?
So when we talk about mid-century, we're talking about the middle of the 20th century or the 1950s, or even a little earlier. Okay.
Absolutely. So you're going to see a lot of the exteriors are going to be very simple, but with usually kind of a radical design that makes you stop and wonder, whoa, what is that building? And so there's some churches that have real long, tall steeples that you're not used to seeing with lower sloped roofs around. You have a lot of designs.
Okay.
You have some other modern buildings that have some different shaped windows, very asymmetrical. A lot of things will stand out to you when you see these exteriors of buildings.
And so in Fort Wayne, since a lot of our housing stock was built in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, there's a lot of examples of mid-century modern homes in Fort Wayne in the architecture. And the good news is it's not all that expensive.
Not necessarily. And when we're talking about interior features when it comes to the mid-century style, you're going to be seeing a lot of this around. And a lot of it, you kind of think of maybe the Brady Bunch when you're looking at some of the colors. And we're really getting those olive greens, those mustard yellows, but also the simple black and white accents, very sleek design kitchens. And so it's a lot of fun, and the minimal style doesn't necessarily have to cost more at all.
Come on into Granite Ridge Builders. We'd love to talk to you about a mid-century modern home and the ideas that you may have to make that home your dream.
Izzy, I love this modern fireplace. It's really beautiful.
The long horizontal lines here remind me of Roman brick, which is what they would use quite often in the prairie style. So prairie and modern, they kind of go together.
They do go together. Prairie is a form of modern, and we started seeing this in the early 1900s. Frank Lloyd Wright really introduced it to us.
And Prairie style, it becomes the first American style ever really in existence at that point. It's marked by long eaves, horizontal lines, like we said, a lot of flat roofs or gabled roofs.
And a lot of natural materials. It flowed with the land, the horizontal lines. It was really a beautiful form of architecture. Now the modern style does have a couple of problems, drainage and leaks. Now the famous home, Falling Water, has a nickname, the 7-bucket building, because of the leaks.
And of course, one of the principles that we use quite often still today is the open concept, and that did start with Prairie style. We use so much natural light, the outside being brought inside. It's still something that's very popular today.
I think this looks great. I'm going to snap a couple of pictures for Ryan, and we'll be on our way.
All right. Do this in the way.
It looks great, Elizabeth?
That looks great.
Perfect.
I love it. I love this modern setting.
I do too. I think what you see behind us, this feature wall, which is actually brick or concrete, even though it's painted white, looks really fantastic. We're doing this in a lot of homes these days.
We are. Now this reminds me a little bit of brutalism, which is a form of the modern movement.
That's true. When you look at brutalism, being a part of modern architecture, a lot of people just think of concrete. They think of the cold, urban decay, just the facade in general, there's not a whole lot of life to it. But it really goes with the modern architecture when we're talking about form and function. So even though those outside facades of those buildings, being a lot of it, is concrete, what they're really focusing on is more of the interior structure. Now, you were going to talk a little bit about where we tend to see a lot of brutalism here in the United States.
We see a lot of it in our government buildings, and it was really popular from about the 1950s to the 1980s. And you'll see a lot of it here in Fort Wayne. For example, the Performing Arts Building downtown is one example. Purdue University here in town also has some brutalism.
Some other examples that you can see here in our very own state is Butler University down in Indianapolis. That was one of the first universities here in Indiana to really hone in on that unique style. Like you said, looking at universities, when you're thinking about what you're doing at a university, you're going to school, you're learning. So from that outside facade and the structure of the brutalism and the concrete, they're really focusing more on what you're doing inside the classroom, which is, you're going to class, you're going to school, and that's where their focus is.
Right, and I know a lot of people do like brutalism, but there's a lot of people who don't. They think it's a very cold feeling, too simplistic. So you'll probably notice that now when you look at these buildings.
That's right.
Well, I think I'm going to snap a picture for Ryan, and we'll be on our way.
Sounds good.
Well, another form of the modern style is contemporary. This gets a little confusing, but when it comes to contemporary, you're going to see more asymmetrical design, geometrical shapes, very open. Also, different shapes of buildings, L's and U's, very open though.
Yeah, and Elizabeth, when we talk about contemporary, this is the newest of all the styles. So this really came in and was really popular starting in the 21st century. I think my favorite part about contemporary is it's known as the worldwide style. So modern was really focused in Europe and the United States. This is a global style that's used in the Middle East. It's used in Asia. So it's a really popular style worldwide.
Some other components of the contemporary design are the windows, floor-to-ceiling windows, framed in metal, also clear-story windows. Sometimes things are reinforced in concrete. Minimalistic design, a lot of color can be brought in the contemporary design as well.
I think another key component to this contemporary style is that most of the architects themselves focus heavily on sustainability. So you'll see a lot of products that are eco-friendly, made out of recycled materials. You'll see a lot of these on rooftop structures or inside that are very green components, even using trees and some natural plant products. They also use that glass, not just for the look, Elizabeth, but they use that to incorporate and heat and cool the building to reduce on air conditioning costs.
As you can see, modern and contemporary, they really do get confused. You can see why, but I think we're done here. I'm going to snap a picture for Ryan. Okay.
All right, Kayla, so we're going to be talking about the international style, which is a subcategory of that modern style. And in the international style, there's also industrial and Mason, correct?
Absolutely.
So in the international style, it probably embodied the industrial idea the most out of all the ones we've talked about so far. And it started out in the West Hemisphere, but it struggled to take a foothold here in America because people really like their cozy, bungalows and their Foursquare that you bought from the Sears catalog. So it really struggled to take a foothold, but we do see these examples all around our area.
Absolutely, and then not even around the area, but around the globe. One of the most popular ones you've probably seen in pictures if you haven't been there yourself is the Villa Savoy in Paris.
Yes, that's a perfect one for this style. There's also a few other ones that are local. So down in Indianapolis, a Macian style, they have what's the Blackman's Visitor Center, which is basically the start of their greenway system.
And you can tell the Macian style is going to be similar to what you see in this Lego set here. It's going to be almost an all-window house with very long projecting eaves and usually a little bit of a wood accent too.
Wood accent with the Macian. So now if we get back to the International, what's the difference between a Macian and an International?
International, you're going to see almost all white, a lot of concrete typically, probably less windows than the Macian as well.
Okay, so now you mentioned this one. This is the Farnsworth House in Illinois, so that's not too far away from here. And that was designed to be a vacation home, a summer home for a doctor out of Chicago. But now it's a historical landmark, and you can actually take tours of it. So there's another example of that international style. And like you said, that one may be leaning a little bit more towards Macian.
And the other one is going to be the industrial, which I really love, some industrial accents. We're starting to see that industrial farmhouse, but staying with the modern, industrial is really a lot of white with black accent, black windows, lots of windows that are asymmetrical and very simple interiors. Again, this modern movement is stripping away a lot of the unnecessary accents and embellishments and going very simplistic design.
Yeah, well, it's mentioned, we said at the beginning, that these are designed to be a machine for the people who live there. And that's what it means. It's very simple, but it's designed to basically enhance their ability to use the house and be more comfortable in that space. Now, let's just scale it back to the international style. You mentioned a few of the key components. Now, we talk about larger windows with narrow frames. So the frames they don't attract your attention. You just see the glass. And then what are some other parts? Now, there's lots of rectangles, and it's also very linear. Now, it can be linear in horizontal or vertical. The international style could be in skyscrapers too. There's a lot of skyscrapers that fall in that category.
For sure. We've been talking a lot about different styles, and you see some are asymmetrical and circular movements. Here, you're, like Luke said, you're going to be seeing the linear designs. You're going to be seeing very minimal accents, very minimal decor inside, maybe a little bit of natural materials with some stone or a white painted brick, but just everything is very basic.
Now, the international version, we keep mentioning that. At the Riverfront development in downtown Fort Wayne, they are currently in the process of building, almost finished up with it. There's going to be the Compass Pavilion, which is going to be pointing true north. And that Compass Pavilion is an absolute perfect example of an international style. So when you guys go down there to see some of that Riverfront development, remember that that's the style that you're seeing at that pavilion.
We've talked a lot about the exteriors of these styles, but one thing to think about is the interior design. And I think this setting that we're at here is a perfect example of how to make your industrial or international home a little bit more fun.
The last version or style of modern we're going to talk about today is the shed style. This is probably the easiest one to identify when it comes to modern design.
You're going to be able to identify this style with one single slope, and it does not have any ridges or valleys or gables. It's going to be typically a very low slope as well. This style definitely leans itself towards skylights and solar panels too.
We mentioned earlier in the show that we had a special treat for you. We've just finished a home that's the shed style. We're going to go take some pictures, and you can take a look at the special footage we have for you.
Elizabeth, I think this is Granite Ridge's most exciting project of the year for sure. As we had just said, we are doing a mid-century modern house, and we're going to kind of talk a little bit about what that means.
It is exciting. Modern has been around for a long time, and there's been a little bit of it in Fort Wayne, but right now it's become really popular. So we're used to seeing it out on the West Coast, but it's finally here in Fort Wayne.
So what mid-century modern or modern is like, there's a few different definitions that we want to kind of talk about. When we say mid-century modern, we're just going back to the roots of modernism, which really started in the 1900s to 1920s. The mid-century part kind of has to do with a little bit of the style in the 60s, where you had vaulted and a little bit more contemporary mixed in there, is kind of how it all has evolved into what we're doing now.
It's kind of exciting too because surprisingly, it's almost a timeless style when you think about it. Everybody wants things open now. So the homes that were built the modern style in the 50s and 60s, they're already open, versus some of the other homes that were built then were knocking down walls, tearing out ceilings. So it really is a timeless style.
It really is.
And as you can see right now, we are in the framing stage, which is one of my favorite stages. And we really get to show some differences today between the conventional style and the truss style when it comes to the roof systems.
Well, one of my favorite things is to talk about what's going to be going on the inside. We have some modern fireplaces and really neat cabinets. I'm going to go check all of that out and make sure things are progressing along well.
And I love outdoor living, and that's one of the traits of this style is outdoor living. So I can't wait to meet you in the back.
All right, let's
And
go take
Luke
a look.
said I get to play with power tools today.
Oh man,
boy.
I don't know if I'm going to go there with that.
All right, I've got to nail in these last few nails for the hurricane straps.
How many of those did you nail up?
96.
96 hurricane straps with 8 nails each, so that's 768 nails. Now, we said hurricane straps. We're in Indiana. We don't experience a lot of hurricanes, so what are those for?
Well, hurricane straps, Luke, are for the uplift on a roof. So like you said, we don't get a lot of hurricanes here in Indiana, but we do get tornadoes. So every now and again, we have winds that come through, and we need to accommodate that by putting in those hurricane straps or those truss straps along those trusses.
Yeah, and sometimes they're known as rafter straps, and we have to use them in certain counties or whenever we use a truss like we did on this house. So now we mentioned trusses. What kind of trusses do we have here?
Well, throughout the house, we have some gable trusses, which are our standard truss. We also have some monolithic trusses, and then we also have some fink trusses.
Yeah, and typically when we do truss...
Did he call me a fink?
No, Tony, that's the name of the truss.
Right.
Oh, okay.
So in this house we have some of those, and on some of our other houses we'll get scissor trusses, which are used for like cathedrals. Like you mentioned, fink truss, web trusses, even sometimes storage trusses. Just think of every roof pitch that is out there, every slope, every design, a truss can be made to accommodate that.
So like we were talking about that vaulted modern. Can you just show me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, a lot of these mono pitches here are what gives us that vaulted look.
Tyler, I'm really excited looking at the print and then looking at the windows back here. I love the way this was done in this modern design. We have 5 windows, and they create some segmented light the way we have them because they're not mulled together. Can you explain to the audience what that means when the windows are mulled or not mulled together?
Sure, Elizabeth. So when we get our windows, when we mold them together, which we do that in some houses, we end up taking the window themselves and piecing them together. But here, as you see in these 5 windows back there, those are not molded together.
Yeah, and you can tell the differences. In between these windows, we're going to have some trim. We might do some drywall, so it'll look a little bit different than if they were molded together. Why don't we go take a look? I want to talk a little bit more about these. I like the butterfly cranks you put on these.
So Luke, I think my favorite thing about this house is definitely going to be this fireplace.
Yeah, it's a very unique fireplace. It's more of a contemporary. It's almost, 5 foot wide, and it's very kind of short but very long.
Exactly, and that's definitely to capture the modern, more contemporary feel of this house. And the best thing about it is it's still a direct vent, so you get that heat, but you don't have to mess with anything inside of it. And what I love is you can do all these glass crystals to make it even more modern.
So there's not actually going to be wood in there, it's going to be these crystals.
Exactly, you're going to have this for the base, and then that flame's going to come up out of that, and it's going to be gorgeous with the glass front in front of all of that.
Now we raised it about 18 inches high. What's going to be the surround of this fireplace?
You know, the best thing about that is it's going to be what's called a real stone. So this is a stone that is a stacked stone, really thin. There's no mortar, so for a modern look. And what they also did it vertically up the wall instead of horizontal like you typically see with stacked stone.
Yeah, and we talked about the wide open spaces in these type of plans. This real long horizontal line really helps fill this space because the kitchen and the great room kind of feel as one place.
Exactly, so the openness, and then it also ties in with this tray ceiling with clean lines, and it's going to enhance this overall feel.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to see what this looks like at the tail end, but why don't we keep putting these rocks in place?
All right, well, you know what I really think we could do?
Get that last one.
Yep,
Nice.
Securing this hurricane strap.
Elizabeth, this place is really coming along right now.
I love it. I'm so excited to see the framing and the simplicity of this modern design. I just can't wait for this to be finished.
Well, what we have going on above us here that the guys are working on is the tray ceiling with this modern, clean look. Now, typically, a lot of people will see in a tray ceiling crown molding with lights and things like that, but when you're talking the modern look, we're not going to do any of that. It's just going to be very simple drywall tray ceiling.
And the framing of this home is so different. I think, Luke, can you describe the difference in the ceiling and the framing here?
Yeah, we actually used a monolithic slope with a box ceiling truss in order to achieve what we were going for here. So we have a vault up in the roof there, but then the interior here, you can see that once the drywall gets hung here, we're gonna have a nice box tray throughout this whole great room.
I can see that now. In the bedroom, we also have a tray ceiling, but it's framed a little bit differently.
Yeah, and actually we're headed there next to frame that one, because that one's not framed. That one's gonna be with the traditional stick frame, and that's gonna have a box tray. So in this house, you'll be able to see the two differences between what a box tray looks like with a truss and a box tray look like with a traditional rafter. So
Now, all of this I really think makes the difference in All right, we need to make sure he's getting this here for us. So.
Tyler, what's your measurement on that?
I've got 4 foot on the knee wall.
The knee wall's on the 4 foot. Okay, good. What about the overhang, the soffit area there?
Got 2 feet.
2 foot.
224
24, that's what we're talking.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Now,
okay,
why do we
so,
go with the 2 foot when it comes to this?
Well, with a more modern house, you really want to extend those overhang. That's what Frank Lloyd Wright
Luke,
did.
I love the
and
exterior
so
of
that
this
kinda goes with
vaulted
that
style
really
home.
well.
It's so unique and different. The roof lines are so different. Now, our traditional home is a stick-built system. So that means everything is built on-site, framed on-site, whereas this is different. It's trusses. Can you explain the truss system and why we used it on this home?
Of course. Well, we mentioned it's a vaulted style home. So there's actually 7 different vaults that are coming together, creating a very unique style. There's a lot of precision that goes into that. So we actually sent this floor plan to a truss company where they had their engineer take a look at it and actually go and design these trusses specific to this house. And it's only a 312 slope, so there's going to be a lot of extra snow load that sits down on that. So we needed to make sure that this roof was structurally sound and be able to support all that extra weight. So that's why we sent it out, and then also from a span standpoint, a lot of open space inside. Spanning just gave us the flexibility to give these homeowners what they were looking for.
And when it comes to open space, even behind us, you can see the outdoor living. This is an important component when it comes to this style of home. Outdoor living is key. So we have our covered veranda. We also have a screened-in porch. And of course, I know the landscaping is also going to go with the theme of the vaulted or modern style.
Yeah, they spend a lot of time outdoors, and you'll see there's a lot of windows on the backside here, bringing in a lot of natural light too.
Finish restocking the barn here, Luke.
You know, there's a lot of terms for modern.
There is. This was such a fun show, and how exciting that we were able to be a part of the modern movement this year.
We've talked a lot about the styles of modern homes that you could do. Don't forget, you can also design the interior of your house with a lot of modern pieces and parts. And don't forget to check out our social media sites for some great fun tips and tricks and some cool brochures coming out to really expand on this.
Hey, Jared, would you close for us?
Yeah, as always, guys, we want to thank you for spending part of your day with us. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about who we are, what we do, and why we do what we do so well, please just pick up the phone, give us a call, visit the website below. Even better yet, come in our front door and tell us which parts and pieces of those modern styles you want to incorporate into your new custom home.
As Choice Design said, we got to clean our mess up for all those things.
It's not happy hour?
No.
I guess we got to put this away.
We're so excited for today's show. We're going to talk about modern design and sorry.
Let's do it. Let's start over.
Sorry.
Here, let's move this over.
I'm going to make fluffy pillows.
You're doing it on purpose.
I love those pillows.
Yes.
We're going to need some more feathers.
And when we talk about modern architecture, we have to talk about the term mid-century modern. Let's talk about it, explain it. What do you know?
Is that how you're starting
No,
it?
sorry.
I thought, okay.
No.
Tyler, this modern setting is really looking great.
I think it does. Oh, man. You want to start that over? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So look straight, Elizabeth.
That looks great.
Perfect.
I love this modern setting here.
I do too. I think that a feature wall like you see behind us really makes everything. Is that really straight? I'm sorry. It does
No,
not.
it doesn't.